This is pristine. They're going to take perfect care of it. They're not going to mess up anything. The guidelines are at least like 500 pages long. And then it's total chaos.
Hello and welcome to Did I Do That? Season 5, Guys, Burgers, and Fries. It's a podcast about graphic designers and the veritable hot dogs we make and the way to making the kind of work that's as brilliant as the bacon cheese dog, because it's all part of the process. I'm Sean Schumacher, and joining me today, a very special guest. Born and raised in Finland, he began his design career more than 15 years ago at the brand studio Method in San Francisco. Since then, he's crossed the Atlantic again to join the London offices of Method, Code and Theory, and JKR before returning to Portland to join Team Studio. These days, he serves as the director of brand and creative at Pair of Thieves here in Portland. It's Tomi Lähdesmäki.
Thank you. I design hot dogs.
You design hot dogs?
Yes.
Well, what kind of hot dogs do you design? I assume for the underwears.
Oh, no, I was just talking about design. But I like the analogy, like, that's a first. Definitely hot dogs are this,
Yeah.
We definitely design hot dogs. That's what design is.
I mean, hot dogs are one of those things that, it's easy to overdo things. It's easy to underdo things. It's got to be just right.
Pack a lot of ideas in there.
Yeah.
You stuff it all in there. And then
into a casing of its own intestines.
Endlessly fry it up. Squirt a bunch of stuff on it. And then
depending on region, it could be a completely different array of stuff.
Give it to your client, then you bounce.
Yeah.
Get out of there.
My friend who lives in Detroit recently told me that the Detroit style of hot dogs is apparently to put a hot dog on a bun and then cover it with chili and then cover the chili in mustard, which is... no offense, Detroit listeners. That's too wet. That's simply too wet for me. I can't get behind that.
Hot dogs are pretty, or sausages are pretty popular in Finland. We keep it plain with a little bit of ketchup, a lot of mustard.
Well, I think that does bring up an interesting point. So, you are from Finland, but you have been in the U.S. for a long time. How familiar are you with the incredible foods of Five Guys Burgers and Fries, our voluntary sponsor? When they find out, boy, they're going to be so excited.
This is where I say some amazing stuff about Five Guys and all the knowledge that I have about them.
I'm guessing it's probably low because that seems to be the running theme is almost no one has ever been to Five Guys who I've talked to about this.
I have never been. I only learned about them last couple of years.
This is setting off an incredible streak. Maybe
but they're incredible, right?
Well, I think I described them last week as the highest priced burgers at the lowest quality restaurant that I've ever been to. The interiors are extremely depressing and feel like they evoke a bus station in just sort of vibe and general safety concerns.
Is that their like official brand value proposition? That's from their brand guidelines, and
I think
lifted it from there.
I think it must be. Our brand guidelines are to make the consumer feel actively unsafe, to be endangered every moment that they are in the space. But
to question what they're eating, like what's in my mouth right now?
So I paid $15 for this burger, and it's wrapped in just Reynolds wrap, just regular ass Reynolds wrap, huh? Okay, sure, that makes perfect sense. But this is the early days of this particular project, of which I am trying to, really encourage Five Guys to just reach out and spend all the money on me that they can, which they obviously must be hoarding somewhere.
They should definitely listen to this episode and they're going to be sold.
We've said such good things about them already. But, it's easy when you're starting something new to have some doubts about it. Thankfully, though, I feel like this may not be as cockamamie a scheme as it seems, because I recently was reading in Deadline that fellow quick service restaurant Chick-fil-A, known for maybe not having the best views on things, has for some reason decided to get into the streaming service game. That's right.
That totally makes sense. I only learned about them in the last couple of years as well. I've never eaten there, and it must be, I'm new to Pacific Northwest, kind of. Been here 6 years, and learned about Chick-fil-A and Five Guy Burgers here.
Well, I think we only recently got a Chick-fil-A. I want to say that maybe there's one or maybe two now, but yeah, so like it's not a thing. It's not a thing that was very big up here even, but yeah, like Chick-fil-A, I guess witnessing how the streaming wars have basically decimated the entire entertainment industry in the same way that the pivot to video kind of decimated the journalism industry like 10 years ago.
So what are you streaming at Chick-fil-A?
Well, that's a great question. According to Deadline, they're looking to get into, originals, a slate of originals, of course, primarily in the unscripted space. And so I'm like, well, hi, what is a podcast if not an unscripted space? Now, do I want to work for Chick-fil-A? No, I'm not even satirically do I want to work for Chick-fil-A. I will not accept your sponsorship, Chick-fil-A. But, when a competitor is doing something stupid, oftentimes that will encourage another company to be like, I want to do that stupid thing too. And
naturally,
it makes perfect sense. When you are a lemming and you watch another lemming to jump off the cliff, you want to go, yes, please.
So the future, we're all just going to be watching Chick-fil-A streaming, endlessly browsing for new original content.
Yes, just the slate of originals coming to Chick-fil-A, I imagine, must just be incredible. They're cows trying to convince people to eat chicken. Those really irritating commercials in which a variety of sort of random people talk about their sandwiches in extremely generic ways.
The next Martin Scorsese movie is going to be on Chick-fil-A. $500 million deal struck yesterday.
Yeah, just a 6-hour-long video of someone eating a Chick-fil-A sandwich. Beautifully filmed. Oh, my God. The story, and then Robert De Niro's in it. But yeah, eat your heart out, Andy Warhol, because you can't film somebody eating a sandwich the same way that the master can. Yeah, it's a very weird thing, and I'm fascinated by just layers of choice. And I was also reminded as I was going through this article that this is like not the first time companies like this have tried to do things like this, which is weird. I guess Lyft, this is the first I heard of it, and I like Bob the Drag Queen, but apparently Bob the Drag Queen hosted a Lyft game show at some point. Maybe it's still on for all I know. I have no idea. And Airbnb, I guess, has done the same thing. So it's just like, I don't know. Why do this?
It kind of reminds me of the time, like when, like you mentioned, like when something gets really popular and then everyone wants to jump on that. It's like when Vice was really amazing, like 10, 15 years ago, working on different client projects, you literally had like everyone come to you, like, describing. So you basically want to become like the Vice of financial services. Or you want to become the Vice of this. And that was like, everyone wanted to do that, but in their own, sector or whatever.
Yeah. There's a lot of things that I'll accept a Gonzo version of. Gonzo financial services. That's not one of them. That one I want to be very professional if we can.
It's just all risk, like full risk. We just throw your money like all over the place and, fingers crossed.
Yeah. Every month they send a postcard of a middle finger to the FDIC just saying, insure this.
They spend all the money on drugs. They do it. And then they hope that the money somehow gets back to them. It's great.
Yes. And they're also secretly funded by a super racist dude.
But they're making content.
Yeah.
It's all just content.
Ultimately, it's all just content. And, if there's one thing that we need in the world right now, it's more content from brands that have no idea what they're doing or why or anything like that. So
short content, only like about a second and a half, maybe. 3 seconds is like a little too much. Somewhere 1 to 3 seconds. That's all we got.
What if instead of 1 to 3 seconds, it was sort of an hour and a half-ish generally? And
who has the time for that? That's crazy talk.
Oh no. If you're hearing this, don't listen to Tommy, the good folks at Five Guys Burgers and Fries, or whatever I just said there. Five Guys Burgers and Fries. Maybe you should just sponsor me, and then we'll figure it out sometime later how the money works. And that's just the way that the pivot to video worked. So it'll be great. It'll be great.
The Vice of podcasting.
Oh no. But Tommy, I don't think you came here to talk about the Chick-fil-A streaming service. I'm pretty sure. You sort of came here to talk about your path into design. I do want to actually pause before we do that, though, because I want to introduce, you're not the only person in the studio here, or you're not the only entity in the studio here.
Yes.
Do you want to tell us about who you brought with us?
My dog of 11 years, Jerri. Jerry's a Springer Spaniel, so Jerri Springer.
Yay! That's right.
She's super excited to be here as well, as you can tell.
Yes, Jerri. Oh my gosh. Hi, Jerri. Hi. Jerri is so excited to be here. I don't think Jerri has has lost any excitement over the course of we've been in here like half an hour. But yeah, Jerri is super cute. Jerri is our first on, I don't want to say on mic dog, because there's not a dog mic that's down there, although I did consider it at one point. I just don't have an extra mic.
She'll just be drumming on things with her tail to the metronome on the wall.
Yeah, between the metronome of the crosswalk beeper and the metronome of the dog tail, we'll be able to do some really interesting time signature stuff with this episode. Sync it up to Dark Side of the Moon or whatnot. But yeah, we're joined by Jerri Springer, and that is... we're gonna return to Jerri Springer at the end for her final thoughts.
Yes.
Just a really slow monologue that she's gonna have.
No, I kind of had to bring her because, like I said, 11 years. She's worked at 4 different companies with me across 2 different continents.
Yeah,
and
that's wild.
And yeah, I got her when she was like a tiny little puppy, and 2 days of having her, and I brought her into the studio, and I was like, yeah, I'm bringing a puppy in, and design studios obviously are, they're welcoming to dogs. Some people have the dogs, but bringing a puppy that's like crazy energy, chewing everything, going crazy. It was wild and stressful, but everyone loves her, and she's kind of a legend within all the places I worked at. But it was pretty wild those first 6 months to a year when she was in the studio, and they had to actually, so the desk that I had at work at that point, they had to get one of those like dog fences that goes around the entire desk.
Interesting.
Because I obviously had to work and I had meetings and all this stuff, so I had to keep her. She had to be close to me. She was kind of attached, so they've just built this fence around my desk. And she stayed in there, and
I feel like they're just slowly inventing an office for you. Like if you'd stayed there, maybe they would have just like, oh, she's getting too tall for the fence. We got to build up some walls here, and oh, she can hop those. Maybe put a ceiling on it.
Luckily, she did calm down and matured a little bit, and got learned to behave a little bit. But like I said, those first 6 months to a year were kind of insane, and that's where actually I have one story of a mistake that Jerri made.
Oh no.
So after, for a couple months being in the desk with the fence, they actually moved me to my own room. We had a project room, but we figured I'll just move my desk in there. It was it was like 2 reasons. I was working on a project that was very top secret.
Oh.
So they had to usually get kind of a bit of a war room, like everyone moves their desk into these project spaces, and you work in there because, other people in the company might not need to see what you're working on or whatever. Mainly it was for the client. Like if they come in, you're like, oh yeah, we're keeping this thing, secret.
Yeah.
We're in this room over here locked up. So I went into that room. I think I was one of the only people working on this project. So I went into the room alone. There's no windows in this room.
Oh boy.
Cool little room. We're set up in there. And the client I was working with was Huawei, the cell phone maker from China.
Oh, sure, yes.
So this is early days for them, I believe. That was like the first I ever heard of this was like 10 years ago now. And we're working on this project to kind of reinvent the UI of their phone that they're trying to market in Europe and US. And they had a small office based in London. That's where the client was. And one of the meetings, we had it in an office. So we bring them in, and we go into the war room where it's me and Jerri in there. I have the whole thing set up. I have all the prints and everything, and we're probably going to be in there for an hour or 2 discussing all the stuff. In the middle, and again, noted, there's no windows in this thing. There's not much ventilation. Jerri's still a puppy. She's in her little section, and she just poops. And
oh no!
And it's a serious meeting. Huawei, serious client. everyone's kind of a little bit on edge, but no one, like, I can't stop talking and presenting all the stuff, but I'm like, oh my God, this smells so bad in here.
Oh.
No one mentions it. Everyone was cool about it. So
but just the room is getting stinkier and stinkier because there's nowhere for it to go.
Yeah.
It cannot be removed.
But then you look at, even the client would look at Jerry and be like, oh, she's kind of cute. It's okay. It happens. So that was the famous mistake that she made.
Jerry was new to meetings. So that's a mistake that a lot of us make in our first 5 or 6 or 10 meetings, maybe more for me, who knows? But it makes an impression, and in a way it's a power move when you get right down to it.
Yeah, that was definitely a power move from her.
So Jerri Springer, living up to the name, truly incredible. So I did want to back up because you're from Finland originally.
Yes. Yeah.
I was reading your bio on your site. I want to quote from that. I ran around the forest of Finland throwing lightning spells and wielding a foam sword, a very looking real one. Were you just like running around with a sword, like kind of?
That's what we do in Finland. That's just normal, but I guess here it's not very,
I mean, we would if we could.
Well, yeah. I mean, I grew up a fantasy geek, and I'm still very much a fantasy nerd. So that part of it is like, most of the childhood, you're just running around in a forest. There's always a forest somewhere, even if you're in, bigger cities or the suburbs, there's like big forests around you. And I think that, must enhance your, imagination quite a bit because you're always running around and making up stuff in the in the forest. And that was certainly, for me, it was a big part of my childhood, was doing that with my friends. And I remember at one point, there was this big forest across the street from the complex that we all kind of lived in, or all the kids, the group of kids there. And the older kids had built these like forts, and at the top of the trees, there was actually like little bridges that would go from one section to another. And it was like a full-on castle that they had built in there. And we would sneak in there all the time when they weren't around and, scope it out. But that was running around with stick swords and foam swords and, pretending you're some kind of, Viking wizard. And I still pretty much do that. That's the reason I moved to Pacific Northwest, is to run around the mountains and forests around here and pretending I'm a wizard with a sword. I
was going to say you came to the right place for that.
Yes.
Probably the most integrated into forest a city could be in the United States.
Absolutely. I'm there's truth to that. I mean, and I was very much, I had a trip to Seattle back in like 2010 or something. This was for a client project. And I had a pretty impactful spiritual, experience. I took a day off during the project, and I went on a big hike and listening to the music. I was listening to a band that's actually from Olympia, Washington, and they do this extreme metal, and it's very connected to the nature. And I was listening to this. I was like, this is the place I want to one day be. Like, it's so the nature here is just endlessly epic.
Yeah,
and so inspiring for me, at least. Like I love hiking out here and just going out in the wild and, looking at the stars and wondering about the universe, or running around pretending I have a sword and throwing some spells.
Yeah, there is something magical about it, though. It's not, I mean, the people who I've known who've moved to other places, like there's just, especially in the US, there's just nothing else that kind of compares to what we have nature-wise out here. You drive in a different direction and you get a totally different kind of nature too.
So diverse. I mean, I'm like, every 6 years here, I'm so geeking out on the nature here. It is so incredibly amazing. And I'm actually, this weekend, I'm going to head down to, the Bend area and go scope out some mountains by myself, me and Jerry.
I'm jealous. It's lovely out there. But so kind of take it back. So like you're growing up out in Finland. Is that kind of where you start to get exposed to design at first?
Yeah, I mean, I've been drawing ever since I was a little kid, and that was definitely, part of what I still do is illustration and drawing. So I grew up in Finland thinking, and even into, moving in, we moved to Los Angeles. My parents moved to Los Angeles, and obviously I was still so young that I followed them there. But I basically, my entire, first 17, 18 years, I thought I was going to be an animator at Disney. That was like my goal. I love Disney movies, and I wanted to that was the dream job. In LA, I actually ended up taking some like weekend courses at their colleges, and I kind of learned about like the reality of that industry, just how massive it is, and how, it will take. I wanted to be a character designer, and to be a character designer on a movie, you have to, endless years of working your way up to the top, and then you might have a chance to become and that's the only thing I wanted to do. So that kind of, crushed that dream a little bit. But yeah, I grew up, drawing fantasy stuff and wizards, and, hoping to do something with that. And that was always like, that was the path. And then once I kind of veered from this dream of wanting to, draw for Disney, I was lost for a couple of years, but still drawing and all that stuff. And how I came to graphic design was actually, I was in community college in Santa Barbara, and it was the last day to sign up for classes. And I was like, oh shit, I don't have any classes lined up. And I was looking at these like pamphlets on the wall. They have like pamphlets for every course that you can take. And one said graphic design, and my mom is a graphic designer. Oh. And I was like, oh, that's what she does. Might as well just try it. Wow. Last moment to pick a class. And now it's crazy to think like I can't imagine myself doing anything besides graphic design as my main kind of, career focus. So.
That's so fascinating. So you already knew what design was, but it was like this weird serendipity of like, I don't want to do animation now that I kind of know how the sausage is made.
I kind of knew what graphic design was. I mean, I wasn't interested in when my mom was, working as a graphic designer. She was doing a lot of branding, which I'm, hugely inspired or, passionate about, and have done a lot in my career. But I never paid attention to it. I was just like, oh, that's what, she does. But she was always, the craft part of it. She's also draws a lot, and especially, in the 80s and 90s. A lot of the logos are still very hand drawn and stuff. So, there was that component of it was still the connection that like, oh, okay, I can draw. Maybe I can do graphic design. But it was also like the last minute, I was like, oh, I got to pick something like, psychology or, graphic design. So I guess in that sense, like graphic design, it was good graphic design that won because the pamphlet, it was typeset right. And I was like, I was able to read it. It was legible. And I was like, I picked it. And
I mean, if it wasn't, then the graphic design class probably wasn't teaching very much.
Yes.
But that's such serendipity. Like, do you remember what that class was like? The discovery that you had when you got into it?
Yeah. So I'd only recently started messing around the computer. So I had I had one of those, the old IMAX, the colorful bubble one.
Oh, yes.
And, so I knew a little bit, how to mess around. I was doing mostly like illustration again, like coloring, line drawings and stuff on the computer. But yeah, those first courses, it was a pretty, big crash course. I feel like the whole entire education, span, I eventually ended up going to a Academy of Art in San Francisco.
Oh, yes.
But the whole entire time I was kind of almost feel like I was catching up to learning about the technology. I was kind of like, in a way, almost like cheating my way through it because like, I remember there was a type design class and the teacher was like, this has to be done in InDesign. Everyone, these are the guidelines. You're going to typeset this perfect. You're going to indent this and do this, and it's going to be InDesign. But I did it in Photoshop.
Oh, no.
Because I was like, I have no idea how to use InDesign, but I was able to like perfectly fake it. And all we were turning in was the prints. So she couldn't like check the, what program. And I was like, oh, yeah, here you go. And she's like, probably thinking like, no way it can be done in Photoshop because that's some nice, indentation, perfect, like, spacing and all that stuff. So I felt like, the whole time I was still kind of cheating and faking my way through it, like learning the stuff. But yeah, it's interesting that one of the first projects in the community college was designing the cover for a zip disk. Those things that we still use widely.
Oh, so much so. I mean, 100 megabytes, 250 megabytes, the options are limitless. Zip disks are, boy, how do you... A zip disk is sort of a chunky floppy, is sort of how...
Yes.
And the floppy, to our younger listeners than that even, It's what the save icon is. So imagine if the save icon was a real thing, but
they were around
bigger.
for 6 months basically, and that's the 6 months that I was in that course, and we designed the cover for.
Well, but they were weirdly the standard for that 6 months.
Yeah.
To the point that I definitely would see like computers at school that had zip drives installed, and these were otherwise very bare bones computers. Yeah, that's so. What was your? I guess what were you labeling with the zip disk? Was it like an album or like?
Yeah, that's a good question. I think it was like you're designing your own kind of. I think the brief was just like design your own zip disk.
Could be anything
for your cool files.
Wow.
Or your cool one file because they didn't hold much. But
no,
yeah,
your 3 seconds of video of a of a 240p music video. That's fascinating.
We also did some. I think there was a poster design for a film festival in Santa Barbara. That was kind of fun. The usual kind of pretty basic little fun projects. But I don't know. I guess I fell in love with it. Right away. There was no resistance, at least from like, oh, I don't get this, or like I'm not able to be creative within this medium, and then it just kind of took off from there. So
at what point do you decide like this is really the pathway? I'm gonna go to Academy of Art. I'm gonna move up to San Francisco. Like,
yeah, I mean the courses weren't so extensive at the community college, and I really liked it, and I felt like I found a path and was in the kind of groove for it. So I knew that I had to go somewhere. There had to be a next step, and obviously Santa Barbara, San Francisco. I was.
Yeah, you're climbing up
from
the
LA,
West Coast.
Yeah. Now I'm in Portland, so I guess I'm going to be in Seattle or Vancouver next or whatever. But yeah, I mean, that was the big school that I had heard of, and yeah, applied there. And luckily, I was able to use some of my credits from the community college to cancel out the first few courses in Academy of Art. So that was a bonus.
What do you end up doing once you get to Academy of Art?
I loved that time. That was so inspiring. The teachers were amazing, and yeah, I think what was really fun about it was, and I still kind of do this, is it's basically like school is a bunch of personal projects, right? Like you have an endless brief to do whatever, and get creative with it. Don't do something boring. If you can brand any company in the world as your project, like don't just brand like the paint store down the street. Like do something cool. Like I'm going to rebrand National Geographic or something awesome, which you'll never get to do in your life.
Yeah.
So it was endless amounts of personal projects, and I got to put myself into them as much. The things that I'm passionate, whether it's music or some sport or whatever it is, I'd make a project about that. Like, how cool is that? So I guess maybe that's, I do a lot of personal projects still, and it's still like that kind of like, well, I don't get this brief in my day job, so I'm just going to create this brief and do it on the side and have fun with it.
Well, I think that in and of itself is like a pretty instructive thing, because it's like, for as much as you as a student will feel frustrated by like, well, this is a brief for class, and like I'm only barely able to come up with my own idea for a zip disk. It's still like the most latitude you'll ever get for professional work. So like being able to do something like that for yourself, it keeps you sane in a lot of ways.
Oh yeah, it's just so fun, right? Like,
yeah,
especially now, like looking back, like. Graphic design is all about designing it up against a brief, and sometimes pretty hard parameters, and whatever twists and turns come along with the project. But at that point, you just have total freedom. You might get some feedback from fellow students or the teacher, but it's all pretty easy going, and you're learning along the way. But it's a bunch of fun, just having fun. I met my wife in graphic design school as well. She liked my type, and I liked her.
You were both each other's type in another way.
Yes. We actually met in type 3, I think it was.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty good thing to take away from type 3. Do you remember any of your other work from that class or any of your other classes at Academy of Art?
Yeah, actually, when I was going in preparation for the show, I was going through that massive hard drive that I have, and I pretty much have all my school projects in there. I noticed that all my folders for all those files are so messy compared to what I have now for work, but it's like all over the place. Like, and again, it was like everything was some, I would certainly like twist it into being something that I enjoy. Like I remember I did a rebrand. I think it was like brand design 2 or 3 or something like that. And I did a full brand system for the World Cup of soccer, and it was happening that summer. It was about to happen, like coming up or whatever, in South Africa. So I designed like the brand for it, but I loved information design and, especially like the classic European information design, like subway systems and all the signage and all that stuff. So I went like nuts, designing all the different signage for all the stadiums and the tickets and and the transportation, for South Africa, and like just so many different collaterals. At that point, I was just discovered Odeliker and the Munich Olympics design, and I was like, I'm gonna do just as extensive design system for South Africa. and so much fun, like again, like endless late nights in my little apartment in San Francisco, and just crunching away and listening to some good music and just designing, especially when you have like you can stay up super late and not feel it at all.
Yeah. Well, you've got ambition, you've got love, you've got ambition, you've got a lot of things kind of driving you at this point. Like that's all I have. Like that honestly, like that's what I put into every, that's the thing that I can bring into design. I'm not like, there's certainly designers who are better at this or that or whatever. Like I wear my passion on my sleeve, and that's what I can bring to a design project. And hopefully like with clients too, like hopefully they can feel that and go along on that, passion ride, and something good will come out of it. Something that we're all kind of stoked about. You and the client going into the tunnel of love on the little swan boat, and then maybe something special happens. Who knows?
Riding that wave together on the board.
Tunnel of Love is something that I feel like I see in cartoons mostly. I don't know what it is exactly. I don't know what, like, is it like a ride? Is there something inside? I think it's just to make out. I think that's the purpose of it.
I don't know what a tunnel of love is.
Again, this is a thing that I know mostly from cartoons, so I don't know if it is an actual thing. But it's like two characters will get into a boat that is usually shaped like a swan, and it's on like a Disney style, like little, water track. And then it goes into a tunnel that is usually shaped like a heart for some reason, that says Tunnel of Love above it. And then something happens, and then they come out the other side.
It gets really psychedelic inside.
I don't know, maybe
the whole world starts melting. That's what like old Disney cartoons. They were kind of trippy.
Yeah, the Willy Wonka tunnel experience basically.
The skeleton starts singing some jolly tunes, and you're in the tunnel of love.
Is it that people start making out in the tunnel of love because they are just trying not to look at the skeletons, because the skeletons are just like, hey, look at us, hey guys, check out what we're doing over here. Probably not, I would think, but still, anything could happen. And listeners, please write in. Tell me, is Tunnel of Love a real thing, or does it just exist for Bugs Bunny? I would be so curious to know. But yeah, that's what you want with your client experience, is to go into the tunnel of love, and then you try not to look at the skeletons, and then a connection is made.
Or you face those skeletons together. And that brings you even closer.
Yeah, true courage is facing the skeletons together. But so you are getting towards graduation here. Like, do you see yourself continuing in San Francisco? Like, how do you start to approach the end of your academic career there?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think I thought of it in any great way or any kind of strategy, but obviously in San Francisco, this is 2007, 2008.
So still expensive, but a lot cheaper to live there than now.
A whole different world still. Like back then, that was still like the old San Francisco. I think I paid like $350 for rent.
Dear God, really? Wow.
But being in San Francisco right at that time, digital design was, just taking off basically.
Yeah.
And the first place I applied at was Method Design, and they were what I really liked about them is brand. Like I said, is always been one of my big passions, and they do a lot of brand work, but they did a lot of digital as well. So they were kind of like that perfect little combo of those. And yeah, first place I applied, and I got the gig as a junior designer there, and
wow,
amazing place to learn. Like, wow, like the creatives around you, especially again in that like early days of digital design.
Yeah,
when we obviously the internet had been around for a while, but design within websites was still like at its infancy.
Yeah, like it's wild to think, but like, and we were talking about this before the recording, like this is an era where a major website from a, like major organization could still be just designed by potentially one person or two people. Like it's truly kind of the Wild West in a way. And like Method is sort of there at this moment of like, well, let's turn it into a more professional thing. Like I was reading, like, they did the TED website, and that was a huge milestone.
That was a big deal. Like that was before I joined them, but that was like really put them on the map partially for digital design.
Yeah.
And it was like you said, web design before that was, one or two people, and they sold it as this bigger thinking thing, like that's the first time when I joined the studios, heard about UX designers. I was like, whoa, there's not only designers, there's strategists, and there's UX designers. And yeah, I got thrown into the deep end of it, learned so much. Amazing creative directors, shout out to Robert.
Hi, Robert.
Just watching other designers do their thing and just soaking it all up. That was an amazing place. And at that point, because they were kind of, getting the reputation of, the digital design that they were doing, we got a lot of the great, Silicon Valley clients to work with. And at that point, it's interesting looking back, like a lot of it was this like conceptual work, like what will our phone look like in 3 years? And so
interesting.
A lot of work that never ended up, seeing the light of day. Yeah. A lot of them, like they probably, they brief the design studio and they do all this work, but they take only a little, nugget of it, but still something, maybe comes out of it. But a lot of work but amongst it, there was definitely some really cool projects that went out into the world, and especially with websites. And like I said, they did branding. So there was a lot of that. And I kind of was like the champion of the brand flag there. Yeah, it was pretty amazing time to learn in the deep end, in the fire of it also.
Do you remember any of the projects that you got to like work on in those early days? Like
one particular one was for EA. I think they either acquired a smaller business or they were setting up like a gaming chat-based or community-based website, and they were calling it Rupture. And so we got to design, or Method was, hired to basically design the website, but also do the branding. And that was it was a really cool brief. It was EA basically get to create a new gaming-centric brand design and a website at the same time. So doing both, the brand and the digital side of it. That project was really fun. What ended up actually happening in the first few weeks when we kicked it off, our creative director, I think he went on holiday. And
it's always a good start.
Again, shout out to Robert, but like Robert was hardcore. I can't even imagine the dude taking a holiday at that time, but he went on some kind of break, and that's right when we were doing the expiration. And there's a bunch. Actually, this project I remember now, like they put almost everyone on it because it was such a cool brief. We wanted to this was going to be a big case study. And that first, week or two when we're exploring, and then Robert comes back and he's like, "Oh, what'd you guys do? Like this is all over the place." Like, and at that point, like junior designer, none of the stuff that I was making, at least for the first, year or two, never went anywhere. You're just basically kind of crunching out ideas to like, fill, have direction 4B in the presentation or whatever. But
yeah, and people are throwing things at you like super fast too.
And looking back at that stuff, like I'm like, oh my gosh, that stuff is so embarrassing to look at. But you learn in that, crazy fire. You're being thrown all kinds of stuff at you, but you're also watching the other designers do their thing, and you're learning from them. And sometimes you get their file and you get to mess around in there to do some iteration, and then you get to see how they built that stuff. And so huge learning experience. But yeah, he came back from holidays like, oh, what'd you guys do? And then again, like all the designers, everyone's working on it. And in the end, that was a really amazing project, amazing case study. And, that's definitely one of the first ones that come to mind.
It's one of those vacations where you're just like, you think you're getting some relaxation, and the minute that you get back, it's just like, oh, all the good vibes that I soaked in are just gone. They've evaporated.
Yeah.
I feel like that's most vacations for me.
Yeah. Like we were chatting earlier, it's like in work, they never build in, there should just be the post-vacation acclimation day.
I mean,
here's the, 784 emails that you can peacefully read through. Take your time, we'll schedule a meeting next week to talk about stuff once you've like adjusted back to it. But no, it's like you come back and you're like, oh, why did I go away?
Yes, yes, I can identify with this so well. I mean, I think sometimes back in the day, back when I worked for, a local arts presenter, we would often deal with theater companies that were based in, say, France. And the word that we always got was make sure to get things done before August because everyone in France takes the entire month of August off.
Yeah.
I feel like if you are going to have a holiday, that in a lot of ways is the best way to do it. Because then it's just everybody.
Everyone, yeah.
You don't have to worry about it.
Yeah.
Because, like, you can send that email. It's not going to anybody.
Yeah.
You know? It's like, that's kind of the magic trick, I think.
I've heard some companies in Germany specifically where they'll like actually, tell you not to check email or anything like that. They put like a block on your stuff when you're going away.
Please. Oh, my God.
Like we don't even think about checking the Slack.
It's just a video of a finger wagging when you got to open your.
I actually remember when so my wife was also hired at Method at the same time. We went to school and then we had the same job. And we were on our honeymoon. We got married once we started working at Method. We got married. We're on our honeymoon. Went to New Zealand because it was during the winter time because it was summer over there. It ended up raining actually the whole time. So I was like, what? No. This doesn't feel like summer over here. But anyway, I remember it was like 2 more days left on the honeymoon. I was like, I'm just going to quickly check the work email just to tip my toe. Is there anything? And immediately, like nothing crazy, but right away you see some message or and I was like, oh no, that project is, and then it's all over for the last 2 days. And you're just thinking about like that project and, I got to get in there and do this and this and that.
It needs a response.
Don't check the email. I'm all about taking time off. That is like, take your time off, recharge, and don't check your stuff. Like, it's so beneficial to just take a break. Like, take a break as much as you can. Like, get away and think about it. That's when you recharge your passions and your inspirations, especially when you travel. Like, you see all kinds of new things. I'm like, I got my sketchbook when I go travel somewhere and I'm just like flooded with, ideas and you see different things and you go into little like design museums and you check out some cool little trinkets and all kinds of stuff. So
your brain needs it. It needs a break and it needs to see new things. And if it doesn't, it will rebel and force you to see new things.
Yeah.
Like Jerri Springer. Hi, Jerri. You're excited about travel. I think that's kind of cool too. You're getting to work with your wife this entire arc too. So like, how are things going as you're starting to kind of move up the ladder at Method?
Yeah, I mean, after a couple of years of being the junior designer and learning the ropes and swimming in the hot fire, and then you kind of start to also learn, I guess, the design business more, right? Like that's one thing that I don't know how it is in different schools or whatever at different times, but at least for us, like at Academy of Art, amazing for so many different things, but also you don't learn the business side of things.
Yeah.
You don't even learn. You do present to other students and your teacher, but presentation is like everything. That's all you do. Yeah. Like that's in design, all you're doing is pitching your idea either to your colleagues or to the client and stuff. So learning the business side of it, learning, what are the responsibilities and of once you move to another level. And well, I think at least for me, like when I started my career, I didn't think of like, what does this look like as a career? I'm like, oh shit, I'm in here, I'm doing this now. And this is just so inspiring and fun. But then you do learn about that and then you're conscious of it. And then you especially, something that the client services part of it was, a big eye-opening part for me is, building those relationships. And I take great pride and value in the relationships that I built in the past with certain clients. But that also is like, that's part of the job. You make connections with these people and you build something together. And, in some cases, those connections go, well beyond the project that you are. They become kind of your, friend in some sense. And so learning about those aspects of a design studio and the creative business and learning about the process being a huge component as well. Like how being really in charge of the process and understanding how you shift a process and how the process for every single project is different and can be different, and how you should be able to think about that side of it so that you set yourself up for success. So you have proper time to do these things, and then you got to do the, the research part, and, whether it's some kind of interviews and information gathering, and then the strategy part of it. Again, like strategy is something that, at least in my schooling, was, not specifically taught. So I think that was like the next step, is like learning about those and being aware of it, and realizing you have a, path to kind of grow in that.
Well, I think that's such a huge thing. I mean, to go back, even the like learning to integrate clients and the way the clients approach problems into your thinking is such a huge like mindset change, I think, for a lot of students, where it's not just like you're into this because it looks cool. It's you're into this because it solves the client's problem, and how you talk about it to the client can completely change how they look at it too. But like also thinking about like as you're moving up, you're in charge of this ship. It has a rudder, and it needs all these different parts, and it doesn't necessarily move as quickly as you can when you're just one person. So like learning how to steer it is so...
Absolutely. I think the steering part is like, the part of it is developing a point of view.
Yeah.
So, when you get a brief or you get a project, you got to kind of have a vision for it, and you start to, have a, whether right or wrong at times, like you still should have a strong point of view. And that was part of that learning experience too, that, just came with the whole package. It's just developing an idea, and then, like you said, steering it. Suddenly when you move up, you become a lead designer or whatever, senior designer, you start art director, you are given the reins, and then you got to have the point of view. But I've always personally liked that, because I tend to have strong opinions. So then I'll just kind of lean into that and be like, this is my point of view. And honestly, like so many times, maybe I've been in the wrong point of view. At least I feel like maybe I'm just going in this because I'm strongly believe, but I'm also new to this thing, whatever we're solving at that point. Like,
yeah. Well, that's the weirdest aspect of it too, because it's like we end up having such a strange amount of information about what the problem is sometimes. And sometimes even the client doesn't realize like when we have been given the wrong amount
of
information.
Like almost always.
Yeah.
It's like they never, I mean, clients, no knock on them, but let's say you're working with like a financial institution, they don't write creative briefs as their like daily thing. So they haven't written the perfect brief. Your job is to kind of uncover the brief. It's somewhere in there. And hopefully that's part of the process again, is like, okay, you come to us with this problem. Let us kind of digest it. We need some time to like analyze it and really research it and understand, is that really the thing that we, need to solve for you guys and such. So that's part of that point of view building as well, I guess. But yeah, like you said, like they, you rarely know exactly what it is that you're going to be designing, or you're kind of discovering it. It could go in a completely different direction or whatever. So
yeah, there's a journalistic aspect to it of discovery that is so, I don't know, weirdly unique, I feel like.
Yeah.
So like, as you're doing all this discovery, like you are, you're moving up the ranks in, at Matter. At what point does like the London office become a possibility?
Yeah. So Method had a London office, I think the whole time I was there. It was pretty small when I joined Method San Francisco. But at one point they just, put out a company-wide email. It's like, anyone interested in jumping ship over to the London office? And
just as simple as that. Like,
yeah. I remember my wife and I, we were living in Inner Sunset in San Francisco. And I think that's when we just kind of like, should we do it? Yeah, let's go for it. Okay.
Wow.
Cool. And what made it a little bit easier is that I'm from Finland, so I didn't have to get a visa, obviously. So that was a little bit easier. But yeah, it was just like, let's change things up and take this opportunity and jump over there. And 3.5 years in San Francisco, and then another 3.5 at Method.
Yeah.
But a whole different, like, I felt like I went to a completely different studio. Obviously have the connections of San Francisco, and you still have the, the owners and the creative. There's a lot of communication within the office, and
it's like it's where you started that office too. Like,
and it was a whole new mix of people, completely different, not completely, but very different design culture and client culture as well. And what was amazing about the London office is almost everyone was from a different country, and that was so cool. We had like maybe 40 people in that studio, and like everyone had a different path and a different place of where they came from, and that diversity was so wild. And that's London too. I mean, London is so diverse. It's like one of the I think back now, moving away from London, is like you have melting pots like New York and any big city, but people do still kind of huddle up in their groups. But in London, felt like everyone is just like right next to each other from every different walk of life. And that's this studio as well. And then we worked with clients all throughout Europe, and something you got to learn is working with a client in Germany is different from an Italian client.
Oh yeah.
Very different. Or to a French client or Scandinavian or whatever, like so different. The things you say and the things that are expected, in the communication, are like, Italian client, you say we got to have feedback in the next 48 hours, and to them that's like, oh yeah, we'll get it to you in the next, month. That's just their way. They're so relaxed about it. Whereas, Germany, it's like, oh, we will, what time do you want it? 10:47, we will tomorrow provide you with the feedback. And how would you like that formatted?
Boy, that's such a fascinating thing to think. Like, the clients have different expectations about when and how things are going to happen.
Yeah, wild times. I mean, and then going from method to code and theory, where I kind of helped bring that studio to life. Code and Theory is a New York-based company and or studio, and they were launching their European office out of London. And with Method, there was definitely a foundation established in London and as a company. But then Code and Theory, it was like Wild West. We just had to win clients wherever we could get them.
Oh, wow.
And I remember just the crazy variety of briefs that would come from anywhere in Europe, but also in the Middle East and the nearby regions. And Code and Theory had a pretty big reputation for digital design. They had designed like Vogue.com, and they had gotten all this press for it. So suddenly all these European companies are like, oh, Code and Theory has an office, But yeah, like I remember the first brief was like for like a freight shipping oil rig, some kind of wild company, never heard of them, and we had to like pitch to do their website or something like that, and just so unique. Again, like at Code and Theory, I had some amazing experiences of pitching for projects that we were way beyond our league at that point, because we were a small office. We had a scrappy group of really creative people there, but we were, again, with that like the kind of reputation that Code and Theory from New York was getting. They are the cutting edge of web design, Vogue.com, and a few other projects. But we were a small group, and we were pitching for. We went to Italy to pitch for Benetton.com. That was an amazing experience, going to the offices of Benetton, like the famous, creative brand of the 80s and 90s, and you're just a couple of young designers just going in there and telling them how to just strategically think about their website and their e-com. And a lot of that times I was like, I have no idea what I'm talking about or thinking about, but I got to have some kind of point of view on it. And some of the pitches we won, and those were wild as well. Like you're kind of, I feel like a lot of the design I've also done is like you're kind of faking it to make it, because you're suddenly thrown into, again, using like financial services as an example. Like I don't know anything about finances, but suddenly I got a client, we're doing an app design for this new investment company, and they expect you to speak their language, and you have like a couple of weeks to learn all about it. And then you're supposed to come in there and be like, well, you should, strategically, you should be thinking about this and this and that and this and this. They speak that language. They know that world, and you're expected to suddenly know everything about that. You can't be like, well, we don't really know what you guys do at all, but let us, teach us. You got to go in there strong and like confident and feel like everything about, how their business runs or whatever.
Yeah, and you don't know where the mines are in this minefield either. Like the people that you maybe bring up as like competitors who are like, oh wait, it's so offensive that you would even consider this as a competitor of us. Like that kind of thing is sometimes so ridiculous.
The amount of times, like, putting your foot in your mouth or whatever by saying something that you think you're coming off smart or whatever, and or knowing the business or whatever. But
do you remember any pitches that went particularly sideways or anything like that? Or
I mean, I feel like there was quite a few of the sideways pitches, but some of them we won. Like, again, it's all about like you're like I said, you're faking it to make it. You're trying to sound like you're the expert in it. And then sometimes you win the project. Yeah. You something, some creative component of it. And so I don't remember like specific pitches necessarily that went completely sideways. Certainly there was a few where it's like, what are you guys doing? I remember there was one, I think it was like a French insurance company, some really big like insurance company. And we were juggling a bunch of pitches, and we basically recycled a pitch from another company.
Oh no.
But left a lot of the, references to the other company in there. We did not get that project, and they noticed it and called it out. But, you just move on to the next pitch or whatever.
But that's so tempting to do though, because it's like, this idea didn't work for this other thing, but we're gonna find the place for it.
And it happens so often.
Yeah.
That was the one time you get caught. But like you and I don't think there's anything necessarily wrong. Like you can apply, an idea to a different brand or company, and you also in that process of applying it, and then if you do get the project and you're working on it, it becomes something different. And there's some nugget of the idea that was applicable to many things, something that's really cool about it that can be applied to different things. So yeah, but going back to Jerry here, the most, notable project that I worked on and what comes to my mind when I think of that time is we pitched to do the website redesign for Manchester City Football Club.
That's a fairly big organization.
Yeah, and I'm a football fan, so I'm like, wow, this is amazing. And obviously a lot of us were football fans, the designers all being European. So it was a pretty big deal, but it was to get that project was like endless amounts of really hard, tough meetings. And one of the final meetings, we had all the clients on at our office, and they're, scrutinizing, whatever we're thinking there. And I remember Jerri was walking underneath the desk, and she would come up to a few of the clients, and they would soften up. Like they were like, few of them were like real hard, but Jerri came around and they'd soften up. They were like, yeah, we'll give you that project. Yeah, let's collaborate. And I was like, yes, she's doing her part. So, and maybe that was the little thing that tipped it over. And but that was a wild ride. And again, like kind of faking it to make it. All of us are football fans, but designing, this was almost a 2-year project that we undertook. And it was this very robust journalistic tool for the football club to transform their website to become like a source of content for all the stuff that they have, right? So, we pitched a big idea, and then we had to execute it. And then it was, many, many months of wild, crazy design. And actually there was one point where this would be like a mistake, I guess, we had a meeting with them over the phone with our main client over there managing the project, and our project manager, shout out to Drini, he I think he slagged off the client at the end of the conversation.
Oh no.
We were all pretty burned out and frustrated, and all like like nothing too bad, but just like, thought he closed the phone and was like, I can't believe they're asking for this and that and this and that. And then the client's like, hey, we're still over here. All of us were like, just that gut feeling like, no. But at that point, we've, been in that boat with them for a year or so. So it's like, we get it. They probably say the same things about us when they close the phone. So it's like, okay, we get it. And they were kind of like, just don't do that again.
That's such an interesting aspect of that I hadn't really considered, is like, if you're in that situation where you're frustrated with them, they're obviously frustrated with you too. Why don't they just hang up the phone? Because all the times I've heard variations of that story, it's that they say something back like, oh, we heard that. Like,
Yeah.
We all know we're in this boat together.
There should almost be like a therapist along with the strategist, UX designer, and designer that goes along the journey and like helps you get through this together. Let's put it all in the open and talk about it.
So basically Star Trek The Next Generation sort of had it right. We need, the captain, the first officer, and the therapist all sort of in the center of the horseshoe on the bridge.
That's the next model for the studio I'm starting. It's going to be just a bunch of therapists and designers paired up together.
In the middle of a starship that's also a fern bar.
Yes.
I love it.
And the floor is littered with skulls.
Well, this is sort of a Star Trek Terminator crossover. Why do they have so many human skulls just laying around in the Terminator future? That feels like it's got to be extra work for the robots to just be like, okay, skull here, skull here, skull here.
There was just a massive battle before then, and it's just made it way more metal and badass. So
just a lot of specifically decapitations.
It was only skulls, right?
Yeah.
So like no other. It was just a bunch of heads on a giant field of heads. And they all perfectly eroded in the same way. There's no nothing in between. It's just like these pristine skulls that have been laid there.
Yeah, sitting directly on top of a pile of just artfully placed bones.
I think it was just like a truck that fell over that was carrying all those like fake skulls that go to those Halloween stores that sell them. They're just like tipped over and flooded the whole area, and they're just stepping over those. They're still killing humans and battling, but that's it.
Well, the robot that drives the truck to Halloween Town just jackknifed on I-95 and just spilled human skulls all over the place.
And Terminator got pissed off.
Yeah, that's why those flying helicopters are there too. Those are the news copters for the robot news. James Cameron loves to paint a picture of it being a complete dystopia in the Terminator times, but like, they have a society too. The robots need to know what's happening.
They need Halloween stores.
They need all the
decorations for their front lawn.
Halloween is their most important holiday. They do need the giant 16-foot tall light up skeleton that you can get at Costco. Must have that. In part to celebrate their overthrow of humanity, but also just, it's fun. Yeah. It's fun. It's fun. The kids can get into it, also they need media. They need media. They're big. Yeah. They're big reality TV fans, if I'm being honest.
They're making content.
Yeah.
Just the Terminator destroyers are like taking selfies as they're crushing those skulls. That's the future.
Hey, I wish there was some way to audibly show like Terminator duck face. Just selfie stick, Terminator, duck face. I don't know. You listener, you're imagining a picture here. Okay, we should probably get back to the checklist.
I don't know. Terminator 2, though, that is such a good movie.
It is.
That was such a pivotal movie for me growing up in the early 90s. In Finland.
Oh.
And watching Terminator, I was like, yes, that's where I want to live.
You want to live in the hellscape that is Los Angeles in that movie.
And I ended up moving to Los Angeles, and I was expecting way more crushed skulls and battles, but no, did not happen.
Accurately portrayed the Los Angeles River, though, I think.
Yeah.
Grim as can be. That truly that is a place where Terminators could be crushing skulls as we speak, for all we know. But probably they're just filming the Fast and the Furious movies. But like, I also love to circle back, just like the human element that comes out in the power of Jerri Springer to like soften up these clients and like make them more receptive. Like, it's so funny how much that's true with like the reception of these things. Like,
absolutely, like it's all you're right. It is such a human story and experience. We're all human in this together. Sounds so cheesy, but like. I think, we can take ourselves so seriously, especially with design.
Yeah.
You go through school and you learn about the masters and the grids of Joseph Müller-Brockmann, and you're like, you never, ever deviate from those grids. And then you're so wound up tight and serious about all the rules, and you got to follow the rules. But like at the end of the day, we're just, we're setting a bunch of type and making kind of creative art and like, and the client as well, like, whatever field they're in, like, it's not that serious. Unless you're working, for a client that's actually saving the world. then you should get serious and make sure you follow the grid. But other than that, you can, budget a little bit.
So this is your permission, everybody. You can fudge it a little bit if your client is not actively saving the world. Just that's the Tomi guarantee. So yeah, like you've moved over now to Code and Theory. How long do you end up like staying there, and like what's your next steps?
Yeah, I was there for 2-3 years until that's the end. We kind of ran into a rough patch as a studio. Just I feel like studios, there is this wave, up and down. Things are good, hiring, things get low, and then we hit quite a hard rock bottom at that point. But I also sometimes life throws something at you and you look back and you go like, oh, I'm really glad that actually happened.
Yeah.
I'll be open. I was laid off, part of a group of people that were laid off because we hit this rough patch. But I remember, even Jerry's part of the story there, I remember like I got called in to talk to the MD there, and he's like, unfortunately, we're gonna have to let you go. And I remember thinking, I was like, oh, great, it's 1:00. Yes, I get to, okay, I'm gonna have it like, I get off early and I'm gonna have this long walk through to get from the office back home. I always walk through Victoria Park, which is like one of the biggest parks in London, biggest park in East London for sure. And I remember I was just like, oh, I'm gonna have such a big long walk through that park, and it's gonna be so nice. It's sunny outside. So as gut wrenching, and it was. We had built the studio, and we had actually like really built it up from a scrappy little thing to something bigger. Got to hire some of my friends from back from Method, and it was an amazing time. So it was definitely like a bit of a gut punch. But then now looking back, like that's right when I started another side, personal project, and I never probably would have worked on that and gone on that journey. And we were just about to have our daughter, who was Mia, who was born in London. And
wow.
So, at that point, a big shift, and I ended up working freelance for a while in London, which is, the freelance in London is very different to here. Here, there's not a lot of freelance. Over there, the creative industry is almost like half freelance.
Oh, interesting.
Because there's so many companies, and it's just benefit. Well, first, you get benefits from the government, right? Like if you're a freelancer, so that takes care of that. So it's like, why not be a freelancer? There's a lot of creative projects, and if you like that flexibility. So I was working, 1 week I'd go to this company, and next week I'd go to this design studio. You help out on all these different projects. So that was quite fun. And I'd worked on a project at Code and Theory for this company called Welcome Collection. They're like a big medical trust that has this amazing, huge archive of all kinds of somewhat medical related stuff. They'll like have a lock of hair from King George V or whatever. And they'll have like the records of the amputations on September 4th in World War I, and
wow.
They have these just extensive archives. So they were digitizing all those archives to, royalty free, and people, students especially, to, go in and study all the stuff that they have.
Oh, wow.
So they were a client of mine at Code and Theory in the last moments. And then right when I left Code and Theory, I just jumped over to Welcome Collection and kind of finalized, or not finalized, but helped see that project even through internally for them, which was interesting. That was going from always being agency side to suddenly that was the first in-house, and seeing the shift also, like from the work that you've done on agency side, and now you get to go on the other side and see, and you're like, whoa, okay, so this, oh my gosh, I would have done that completely different and all that stuff. And something similar to ended up happening with Pair of Thieves, where I'm at right now, also being on studio side, working on a project, and then leaving and going client side. So it was an interesting shift, and you realize how, after that first shift, I don't think I would treat any agency studio project the same way anymore. Once you see how it is, where it goes, and what happens to it on the other side, good or bad, like it's just so different perspective. You're like, oh, you have this ideal, like you're going to design this thing, you're going to design these amazing guidelines that are all typeset perfectly on a grid. And you throw it over and you're like, oh, they're going to, this is pristine. They're going to take perfect care of it. They're not going to mess up anything. The guidelines are at least like 500 pages long. And then it's total chaos on day one when it gets thrown to the other side. And you're like, oh my gosh, all that stuff that I did over here, and none of that matters. And they're going this way. But it's also like, it's interesting. That's just the reality. Like, it's such a different dynamic internally for them, whether it's a brand or a new website or some kind of, new tool that they're taking on. So,
and they're, it's like those types of things, because I've talked about this with students too. Like, a lot of times what goes in a set of brand guidelines can be idealized as to what the problem that you will encounter are. And then, whoever is working in-house has to look at those guidelines and go like, well, the problem I have is a lot different than this one. So I'll just take my shot. And like, that won't necessarily be the right, solution that they come up with. But it's like, they are trying to solve a problem just the same as the team coming up with the brand guidelines were. And
exactly.
Sometimes those problems just don't mesh.
They don't like that. Yeah. You don't know the scenarios that they're going to be applying it to. And most likely the thing that they're going to have to use it for, whatever, let's say it's a new brand, like that wasn't accounted for in that, again, pristine 500, perfectly typeset on a grid guideline that you set up and that PDF that you sent over probably never even got looked at.
No, it may have not even been sent over to that junior designer.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
This says password protected. I don't, does anyone have the password? Oh, everyone else has gone home. Well, okay. I'll just do my best. There's a screenshot of the file in the email. It's a little small, but I think I can figure it out.
Yeah, I worked at Welcome Collection for a little while there, and that was awesome. I knew that was a client that I had developed a really good relationship with. They had actually been on a previous client of mine at Nature, the scientific journal.
Oh,
we redesigned the website for them. So this the main stakeholder on that project went to Welcome Collection. That's how I got that project there. So that was definitely one of those relationships that I was like, really stoked about.
Yeah.
And was friends with the person and, continued that journey and was at Welcome Collection for a while and then just started kind of hopping on different freelance projects just to, and it was kind of ideal at that moment. Our daughter was born and, the flexibility of having a freelance where you're like, oh, I'm going to work here for 3 weeks, then I'm going to have a couple of weeks off and then work on. But I also, that was the last year of the London stint and, having a child in a big city, we were kind of both, my wife and I, we were kind of evaluating like what's our next step and stuff. So we wanted to be somewhere with fresh air and a little bit more space. And we definitely weren't the kind of parents maybe to raise a kid in such a big city.
Yeah.
And not for everyone. Amazing benefits to it as well. Just even the cultural diversity of a big city like that. But yeah, it was we kind of looked at either go back to Finland or Portland. Those are the two options. And
really?
We were kind of interviewing at both places and just kind of almost a little bit of a flip of a coin. Not really. I mean, I think at least for me, I really wanted to come here. I had visited that one time. Like I said, way back in the day, visited Seattle and had this like, kind of a spiritual experience with the landscape and the music. And I wanted to come here. And my brother had just moved here. And we didn't even coordinate that. He was like, I met up with him in Finland before we moved. And I was like, thinking of moving to Portland. He's like, oh, I'm moving to Portland too. So
wow,
that was kind of part of it as well. And yeah, like I was saying earlier, the nature here is definitely what brought at least me here. This is an amazing place.
Yeah.
For that specific reason, the nature and the fresh air and all that stuff. So
that's not a thing that is in large supply, I would think, in the middle of Zone 1 of London.
No, it's even to get like on a little hike, it takes you like 3 hours to get out of the city.
Yeah.
And then you're, okay, I'm out of the city, but now I got to get to the place where I wanted to go in nature and it's going to be another 3 hours. And granted, public transportation is amazing there and it's so fun. I mean, such an inspiring place to live in London with the amount of like design. Yeah. Like I grew up like, going to school and starting a method those years, especially, I was so inspired by European design and especially England, like the some of the legendary designers, working at that time, Build and Spin Studio and all these different small practices.
Yeah.
So then, living in London and graphic design everywhere, going to conferences, and you have, the dream lineup of, designers from Europe speaking and, seeing all that design and stuff. So for that, amazing place.
So you are moving to Portland. Do you have like what you are like actually going to do out here lined up, or are you just like kind of just going for it?
No, I had to line up a gig.
Yeah.
So I interviewed a couple of places, and one of them was through a connection from a friend at Method, landed at Team Studio, a small design studio that, kind of also, brought the experience of setting up a little studio. And that was a really fun, amazing run for a couple of years, doing, little projects here in the Pacific Northwest. And one of those projects then ended up being the rebrand of Pair of Thieves, where I'm currently at. And I didn't know anything about the company before then, but a rebrand project. I was pretty much the only designer working on that as the kind of lead designer. Did the project and then developed again another relationship through the project. And my time at Team Studio came to an end. I was like, knocked on the door of Pair of Thieves, and that was very similar to Welcome Collection. It was like I just finished the project, this rebranding, package design, and then I jump ship to the place, and I'm like, oh my gosh, it's only been a couple of days that they had this, and they're already going in that direction and that direction. Oh my God, I'm so glad I'm here. And
you're seeing things immediately, like, well, let's get it back on track. Yeah. That's so interesting to be like, in that boat where you like once again can like take your relationship and like build it and solidify it, and it's already ready to go, because that's the hardest part of like making a transition like that, is the relationship building. Is this going to be a group of people that I can gel with? And like you
absolutely,
already know.
Yeah, absolutely. I think like now looking back, I realize how important it is to have those relationships with the clients. And you get to know them as people, as humans, and you develop friendships, and those matter, in different opportunities that eventually, arise and change your path. Yeah, I've been there 3 years now, and wild ride. It's we're kind of in this mode of like transitioning from a startup. The company was founded 10 years ago, still pretty small, always has kind of been small, this kind of like a little bit of an underdog company, like challenging the men's basic realm. And so we're in this almost like, I feel like this bit of a growing up graduation moment where like we need to step it up. And we have stepped it up in the last couple of years. Like projects are bigger and we're growing and need to grow, the business side of it.
Yeah.
And with that comes, new challenges, new opportunities, but we are a small team. So for me, what was really important, obviously I'd worked in-house at Welcome Collection for a little bit, but it's always been design studios.
Yeah.
And I've always been really interested and intrigued by being in-house. I had a lot of friends or colleagues who, after a couple of years of studio jumped, in-house and saw they were doing some, there's definitely benefits to that. And, but for me, it was always like, it has to be the right brand. Like I can't go somewhere where something doesn't align with who I am.
Yeah.
And with Pair of Thieves, it's just a creative opportunity. So I, at Team Studio, I designed the logo. It's a bear, and I drew a hand-drawn bear as the logo, and designed the system. And then coming on board, like it was just even more of that branding. It was like that branding project just was extended by multiple years, and we're still kind of in that mode of launching this brand. The brand awareness is, low compared to some other big companies. People do know us. There's a passionate following. So it's been a wild ride, and it still continues to be a wild ride. But at the end of the day, I still design a lot, which is for me is really important. Like the craft part of it, like I can never fully let go of the design, not because of a control thing, but I just love the craft of design, like drawing icons or setting type or whatever it is, drawing some, component or whatever. Like I love the craft. Like that's at the end of the day, that's what I want to do. Yeah. But I also provide other value through the experience and stuff. So very hands-on. Like everyone on our team, like, some of, the employees
some distinguished alums.
Yes. Shout out to Kyle and Romeo.
Hi, Kyle and Romeo.
we have a small team, but everyone's so creative, but everyone has an opportunity to do a lot. Like this isn't where you're a little tiny cog in a giant machine and you just get to move this one pixel back and forth over here. Like everyone's kind of in the deep end together across the whole company because we're still so small. So that opportunities, is exciting. It can be challenging a lot of times, but it's also super exciting. So
yeah, that's a big place to be. I did want to double check because I know you brought your computer out.
Yes.
And we have not looked at the computer yet. Is there anything else that you wanted to share?
Yeah, there's one. So I want to actually, this is one that I wanted to show you and talk about because it has some, I guess, like parallels to how I think about branding specifically.
Yeah.
So for me, branding as always kind of goes all the way back to the kind of fantasy world that I have in my own head, being a kid and running around with a sword. Like branding is, so backing up a little bit. So fantasy is all about world building. Like I love Lord of the Rings.
Yeah.
Read that 100 times, basically thought I was going to be an elf when I grew up. And
boy, that one's going to be disappointing because it's hard to make that. It's hard to make that leap.
Instead of an elf, I became a graphic designer.
It's the common fork in the road for people. It's either elf or graphic designer.
So, but fantasy and creating, which again, like goes back to wanting to be a character designer, fantasy is all about world building. And to build a fantasy world, especially on the scale of Lord of the Rings or, any other crazy sci-fi or fantasy book out there, you have to build a believable world and you have to think about all the different components. So I've always looked at branding. The reason why I like branding is you get to build a world for a company.
Yes.
And especially cool if it's a inspiring company or they have an inspiring product or inspiring, foundation or values or whatever it is. And then you get to you have to think of like, well, who are the characters? What does the map look like? What are, with the customers or the followers of the brand, they are also partaking in that world. So what are the mechanics of the world and what's the currency, in this world? But I always struggled with that as well. Like that's the way I looked at branding, but I was like, I love fantasy. I love world building. Like, am I just crazy to think like branding and fantasy world building are the same? But to me, it is like, if you look at some, for instance, like a Patagonia or a National Geographic, they sell you a world.
Yeah.
And one world that you can ask people all around the world to close their eyes and picture, what is the world of National Geographic? Oh, you're on a safari, you're taking pictures, you're being chased by lions and you're having, this amazing time. That's the world that they sell. And then there's so many layers to it. And similar to Patagonia, they obviously have strong values that they built a brand on and they built a world around it. When you purchase and you are a follower of that brand, you are, a character in that world walking around and, trading and speaking that language and having sword fights and all that stuff. So to me, like branding, and at least that's how I, at least in my head, justify, my passions of fantasy and world building and the branding and the work I do.
Yeah.
So with this project, which is called Trigalax, I thought of like, why is graphic design always this serious thing? That the only way to do graphic design is to have a client, basically come to you and, we need a new brand or we need a new website, whatever it is, like solve this real world problem for us. And then I look at like, again, fantasy and illustration, even they live in this like freeform world where you can draw whatever, you can create a whatever world. Why doesn't graphic design ever do any world, like fantasy world building?
Yeah.
So I was like, all right, well, I'm going to brand a company in the far distant future. And through the medium of graphic design, I'm going to tell the story of this fantasy world. So this is like, Trigalax is this mega huge company across the universe. It's basically their like transportation mega company that controls all the different transportation that happens across the universe. And
damn, they really got that locked up.
And Trigalax, because there's basically 3 habitable galaxies, and they are the transportation between those 3 galaxies. So you can see there with the logo. And then from there, it was just like this personal project where I just ended up creating a bunch of materials. Like the first thing I thought of was like, I want to create a brand identity guidelines for this one specific station, which is between this, there's like a extensive written part of it, not too extensive, but there's like a little bit of written part to just kind of give a little context. But there's this one specific station that's in between two planets. It's like a transportation hub, essentially, for freight travel and regular travel as well. And there's a graphic designer there applying all the graphic design to all the signage within this massive, huge space station. But they're going to need an identity manual. So what does that look like? How to apply this identity?
It's got to have a weird alphanumeric code too.
Yeah.
Every good piece of sci-fi needs a weird alphanumeric code.
Yes. And yeah, so there's like, how to use the logo, what kind of typeface. I just designed a new typeface for it, all the colors. And then from there, it's like, this is where it was just having fun, like thinking of all the different entry points for all the spaceships that come in. Like, this goes back to like the design of, Margaret Calvert or Iker, like I always admired those designers who had created these real design that actually affects people's lives every day.
Yeah.
Whether it's signage or information design that, moves people around. So for this station, having cargo ships and commercial ships and sovereign ships, where are they going, and all the different docking stations and all the different alien races, where their like immigration facilities are, and how to use fusion energy pump for your spaceship, and it just kind of went from there. There's thinking about they have to have their own fire and rescue department within the space station, waste management, personal resources, and dark drive technology, and even thinking about the maps of like where does this specific station sit within the different types of transportation, and then thinking about ships and graphics on the ships. And
there's so much world building in this. Oh my God. Wow. But like even the ship design is like, that is it's so unique, but it fits so well within this, like, this is a shipping company, so it's going to be kind of a hodgepodge. It's going to have, a bunch of different elements, and like I'm imagining the sphere is just like something that's like ideal for pressure if you need to go to an atmosphere that's a little higher.
Yeah. I mean, it's endless. I mean, if you have a big, huge station, obviously there's going to be a lot of application of. There's even got to be some marketing materials to how to market to the travelers and to use their specific services to transport your goods. And this again, is trying to bridge those two worlds and have fun with the restriction of graphic design.
Yeah.
Not thinking about the illustration where most sci-fi immediately goes into just the drawing of stuff, but this kind of stuff. And I'm really inspired by Fifth Element, the movie, for instance.
Oh, yes.
And
my God,
District 9, which both, all those great sci-fi movies, they have great graphic design. There's some graphic designer that got to work on, the little stickers that goes on the guns for District 9 and the logos, even RoboCop, the mega corporate logo. And so that was the one application where I was like, oh, that's where graphic design and fantasy come together, is when they work on movies and design for those. So,
but to be using graphic design as the primary tool for this world building, I think it's really remarkable. Part of me is also I would love to play a D&D campaign in this world as the person who's designing these graphics and having some sort of adventure.
That would be super fun, is to create the actual story components for the game, and to have a whole story for that.
But it's all already here. It's just you built it out in a different way, through what the design is and how it has to be used in order for this whole enterprise to function.
Yeah.
Not the Enterprise, of course. That's a different.
No.
That starship already got designed.
Trigalax.
Trigalax.
Specifically the deep station.
Yeah. God, look at that station too. I love me a good lumpy boy like that. That's a good. What a wonderful. Oh my gosh, that's so beautiful.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being on here, Tomi.
Thank you.
What a pleasure. Where can people find more about you and more about Pair of Thieves?
Pair of Thieves. You can. If you have extra minute, I brought you a little gift. I'm going to grab it for you right now.
I have a suspicion about what this gift is.
No, Jerry, it's not food for you.
So
here,
disappointed.
I'll just hand this to you.
Oh my gosh.
You can see some of the design work there.
Oh yes. These are beautiful. Oh my God.
Do you recognize the dog on the back of that package?
Oh my gosh, Jerry's in the packaging. Wow, that's wild. You've brought in some incredible underwear and some incredible socks. Oh, look at these. Oh, these are gorgeous. And just in time for the cold season. Oh my gosh, you give me so many things.
I'll just say what's wild about like the experience again at Pair of Thieves for me is like in school I designed a lot of packaging stuff, as you know, most design students definitely like 10, 15, 20 years ago. And then you go into the design industry and I never touched anything packaging until I joined Pair of Thieves, and now I've designed countless amount of packaging for them, which is wild at this point, still like a completely new challenge and completely new fun opportunities. And like I said, like Pair of Thieves is very much challenging a lot of things in the packaging specifically. Like we have for all the different sizes, most of our products come in 6 different sizes. For each size, there's a correct size model represented on the package. So everything that we shoot has to be shot with 6 different models. And
wow.
But we also, that's like if you look at some other, Hanes or whatever, Calvin Klein, it's always just one single ripped dude on the front. And you're like, how are you supposed to relate to that if you're buying a 2X size, for instance? So,
Yeah, and that single ripped dude is a dude that was shot in 1988, and but yeah, this is incredible. I think that's such a clever solution. It's so wild to actually see Jerry in the packaging. You're the first guest to ever bring a dog in the studio, and you're the first guest to ever give me underwear as a gift.
Yes.
So we're crossing off 2 incredible milestones today. Thank you so much. So yeah, you can go get this stuff at Target, right?
Yes, yeah. And other places as well.
Yes. Where can people find more about your work?
Mostly, I'm now just posting stuff on Instagram. So Tomi, Tomi from space. That's where it's lately been a lot of, I'm working on some music. So I'm posting a lot of clips of that. That's eating up all my side project time at the moment. But that's where I do a lot of illustration as well, like a lot of illustration around inspired by the mountains and stuff. I actually I'm really excited to have a little show in Sisters near Bend.
Oh, yes.
Coming up in November and December at the Sisters coffee shop there. Get to put up a lot of pieces. So if you want to see some illustrations about mountains and maps and geology, go check it out there.
You have some really cool stuff. I was looking before you got here at your Snake River poster, and
nice.
Very, very lovely type in that. So thank you again so much for being here.
This has been a super fun experience. My first podcast, I listen to a lot of podcasts, and it's kind of wild being on a podcast. So, and I
does it live up to expectations? We've got a wobbly table. We've got
that's what I expected.
A room that seems to have increased about 20 degrees in the time that we've been in it.
It's a good audio in here, good smell in here. All good.
Thank you so much.
No, I'm so thankful and stoked. This has been awesome.
Oh, you've been awesome. Also, hey, thank you for being listeners. Please remember to rate, review, and subscribe if you haven't already, and tell anyone and everyone you know about the show. If you want to hear even more from us, there's always Instagram or our brand new newsletter. You can find those and a ton more on our site, dididothat.design. I think this is also the first episode going out since the big news has been broken that we're going to do a live Fonterversy as part of the AIGA Design Conference this year. So if you're not yet going to the conference, go get tickets. They're actually really cheap because it is online this year. We've already started digging into the story, and I can tell you, it's going to be a fun one, and you'll be actually able to see us. So, go check out dididothat.design and find out more about that and so much more. So this has been Did I Do That? I'm Sean Schumacher, and as we always say at the close of every episode,
good night.
That's what we always say. Good night and good morning. Okay, bye. We were talking before the recording, and I might loop that in somewhere of the incredible just world that James Cameron has built in the 3 seconds of the future that we see in Terminator 2. Just, skull crushing and helicopters and all that.
That's still coming.
Yeah,
next year.
Oh no, is that how they're launching the iPhone next year?
I think it's after the election. It's a bunch of Terminators take over and
friends. This is why you need to vote. I don't think you understand how imperative it is. But don't vote for John Connor. That's a mistake that too many people are making. John Connor is not one of the candidates. Don't vote for him. Oh my God.